Hello folks, it's Brendan aka LostLegend here, bringing you a track breakdown for my latest track, Running Man, which is out now on Pure Trance Neon. There's links down in the description where you can stream and purchase this track, um, so the support would be greatly appreciated. As you may know, this is a cover or an interpolation of a track from the Running Man soundtrack written by Harold Faltermeyer. It's actually a motif that runs all the way through the movie, but it's based mainly off this specific track called Intro slash Bakersfield, if you want to go and check that out. Um, Initially, I never intended to send this out to any record labels. I wanted to self-release this and put this up on Spotify myself. Um, but I had a lot of trouble trying to obtain a digital license for it. The particular distribution company I'm using just didn't like people sending movie soundtracks in it. I think the legality is a bit iffy on those types of things. So I asked around, and a producer friend of mine said, why not just send it to a label? See if they might have the resources in order to kind of get a license for it and get it out there. I'd previously done some work with Solar Stone earlier in the year with my remix of Shards, so I thought, why not see if he would like it. Sure enough, I think that was the middle of August. I sent that over last year, 2023. I think by December it had been released on Pure Trance Volume 10, which was like an amazing kind of privilege to be part of that kind of landmark release on their label. And now here we are in February of 2024, and it's got its full release, and I'm really happy, and I can't wait for you all to hear the full version of the track. Before we get started with the breakdown, I'd just like to point out, how simple this track is. It's like 42 channels of audio, which in this day and age is not much at all. And I think the majority of this is made with Ableton Live stock plugins. I think there's like two or three external third-party synths that I've used and a couple of effects, and that's about it. So if you're a new or an up-and-coming producer, this is to show you you don't need to spend thousands of pounds on plugins and equipment. You don't need try and mix 150 channels of audio to get a professional quality song that's got to get released. Sometimes simple is better, and getting the basics right in your track will go a long way. Right, let's get into this. We're going to start with the bass up here. So as you can see, it's split into three separate parts. We have the sub, the mid, and like this kind of gritty overtone sort of synth. So let's go through them. The first is the sub, and this was made, I believe, in Silent, which is it's a basic saw wave with a low pass filter taking out the high end and a bit of drive on the filter. Well, so it sounds like this. Really quite simple. And then there's a mid bass over the top, which, if I remember correctly, it's a Spire patch. It's once again, it's just a simple saw wave with a plucked filter. I've given it a bit of a boost in the mids, took off some of the highs and all the lows, compressed it to kind of give it more pluck, and that sounds like this. As I say, really simple sound, but it works in the context of the track. And next up is this sort of gritty bass um, sound, which I believe is from like a sample pack. Oh no, yeah, preset pack. Apologies. And I've edited it somewhat, just kind of pump the filter up, give it more grit. And this is just to kind of give the bass a bit of an edge. Once again, quite simple, and together it sounds like this. To say on the main kind of bass channel here, I've just kind of scooped out this little frequency here around the 250 hertz mark, which it was kind of sounded a little bit muddy, not a huge amount, just about 3 decibels of up there, and then through an LFO tool just to kind of give the kick some space. Next up, we have this acid kind of pad that runs underneath the bass line, which um, is just a serum patch. It's really simple, actually. It sounds like this. And it just gives um, track a bit of texture. If you look at it, it's really simple. It's this um, these two saw waves. This one I've used the edit function to remove the fundamental. This I'll get into why later, but it just sounded cool on this particular patch. Drop them down to different octaves, and I think on the effects they've got a bit of chorus and a bit of reverb, and it just gives it this nice dark pad sound underneath the bass line. Next up, we have the sort of 303 acid sound. I think this is gives the whole intro of the track this real drive and this real kind of energy. Um, Solo this. See, I'm using the velocity here to control the filter to kind of give it that movement. And this was using Procyon 2, which is this amazing sort of TP303 emulator. It's I think one of the preset patches that are on that come with it. It comes with a load, and I've just kind of tweaked it a little bit to work within this track, a bit of processing, panning, and etc. And if we play that all together along with the kick and the bass pads and the 303, just get this really awesome sort of dark driving sort of low end for the track. Okay, next up we can take a look at the percussion. So we'll start here with the kick drum, which is an essential part of any electronic track. Um, and it's this quite punchy, heavy sounding kick drum. Um, not a huge amount of processing here, just a little bit of EQ to roll off everything kind of sub 20 hertz. I've scooped out a little bit of the mids around the 450 hertz mark. You get a bit of boxiness in that kind of region, so it can be sometimes good to kind of just pull that back a bit. And I wasn't entirely in love with the click at the top end. I thought it was a little bit too harsh, so I've kind of removed some of the high end stuff. So if you listen before the EQ, it sounds like this, and then with it just kind of tames it, maintains the kind of low end character. Um, I'm not a big fan of over processing kick drums, especially when they come from these like premium um, sample packs. They're already processed to death. If you need to have 100 different EQ spikes and troughs on there and like a ton of processing, then maybe you've picked the wrong kick drum. Pick one that works. There's billions of them out there. Um, so yeah, we'll move on now to the main sort of high end percussion here. Um, Once again, it's really simple. We've got your basic open hi-hat, which is a kind of a 909 style open hat. Basic kind of trance clap. Got a bit of a transient design on just to sharpen the snap when it initially hits in. A little basic trance loop that I've kind of chopped up and shortened. It's got some shakers and hats and other bits in there. Sort of a closed hat, playing 16ths. So that's kind of pan left and right. And also pan. I think that's got a bit of groove on it as well, a bit of swing just to make it sound less robotic. And then at the bottom we have this kind of ride cymbal that comes in at certain points of the track, which is a basic kind of 909 ride cymbal, all the bottom end rolled off and going through a delay. So we get this kind of nice bouncy sound from the cymbal. And you play that all together with the kick drum as well. once again, it's nothing super exciting, but it's driving and it kind of really pushes this track along. We also have this separate section of transitional percussion. So this is things like crash cymbals, reverse cymbals, snare drum, some little impacts. So you can see I've got this little kind of cool echo clap here, and this is more of a sound effect than an actual piece of percussion. I've just used two instances of Ableton's drum synth that creates clap sounds, and it's gone through a ton of effects, some EQ, some delay, some reverb, phaser, flanger. It's and I've filtered each one of them differently and panned them from left to right. So you have the first one, which I believe is sort of panned over to the right. Would help if I activated it. And this one that plays over on the left, I believe. So when you play them both together, it creates this really nice kind of textured effect in the background just to give the track that little bit of ear candy. Listen to it in the context of the entire track. Obviously, we have the other parts of the percussion, you know, just once again a basic kind of crash cymbal. We have our snare rolls here, once again, pretty simple stuff. And this kind of impact clap, which I've used this actually in a few different tracks. It really works, and you kind of throw it in at the end of the bar just before you transition to a new one, and you get this sound, which sounds absolutely great. You play it with everything. And finally, for the percussion, we just have this kind of huge snare, which plays out on the breakdown, which you've probably heard. It's just to kind of give it that bit of interest and kind of works closer to what the original song sounds like if you've heard it. So yeah, that's it. That's the percussion. So now we'll take a look at the pads, um, which have come up with these really sort of epic, kind of dark sounding pads. You know, using the chord progression from the original. So all together, sound like this. Oof. So just to break this down, um, we have this kind of main pad here, which is the main sort of foundational sound of the pads, which is it's actually Ableton's own wavetable synth in there, and I love this patch. I made this a few years ago, and I use it in so many of my tracks. They're just these really lush, thick sounding pads. If we take all the EQ off, you can hear just how kind of nice these sound. So yeah, they've got a fair bit of processing on them at this point. The second part of this is this choir, which is I think it's one of the basic Contact patches. It's one that if you get even like the free version of Contact, you get this kind of choir in there, and I've put it through like a saturator and a chorus effect just to kind of make it stick out a bit more in the mix. So it sounds like this. Next up we have this kind of saw pad, which is kind of a sweeping sort of sound. It's a spire patch with some pan on it, so it pans from left to right to kind of give the pad some more stereo excitement, so to speak. Like really mysterious sounding, and it really adds to that kind of dark chord progression that goes throughout this track. Next up, we have this kind of angry saw pad. Once again, the original has this kind of 80s kind of stabbed synth thing going in the background, so I tried to kind of recreate that with a more modern kind of feel to it. Um, Once again, I think this is similar to the patch that I used in my Shards remix. Actually, I used something similar in that, and it's just a serum patch, two sawtooth waves, with a bit of unison detune, one dropped to a lower octave, and just a really long volume envelope, just so it kind of stabs initially, and then just kind of takes a while to fade out. And finally is the sub pad, and this only plays during the breakdown. That's just to give the whole kind of mix a bit more thickness when there's no drums or bass playing. And once again, that's another serum patch, I believe. So the interesting thing about this, and I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about the acid pad, is you look at this strange sawtooth wave shape, and this is an idea I got from Alice over at Mercurial Tones Academy. I'll leave a link in the description to her channel. Absolutely fantastic. Um, and what you can see is happening here is we've got a sawtooth which is with a bit of unison that kind of gives it that Reese bass sound. But we also have a sub oscillator there playing the bass part. Um, and the problem is that sometimes you can have the fundamental frequency of the saw can interfere with the fundamental of the sub, and you can get some phase cancellation, and you don't really get a very stable bass sound. So what I've done here is, if you go into the edit on Serum and into process, you can bypass the fundamental frequency of that particular oscillator. So this will still sound like a respace, but it won't interfere with the sub. So if I remove the sub, you can hear kind of still sounds thick and full. But if we check, if we put an EQ on this channel here, where you can see the bass fundamental is really stable. So let's check out the lead saw synth now. We take a listen to this in the track. Get this kind of huge layered super saw lead here. And this is basically split up into three layers. We have the main lead, and this provides like the kind of main kind of stable point for the lead that you hear. So it sounds like this. Next up, we have another lead which is played an octave higher and has a lot of the low end rolled out. And this is just to help the lead itself cut through the high end of the mix. And finally, we have this ARP lead here, which is much more grittier, aggressive sounding saw sound, which kind of gives the whole um, lead sound some fullness and some grit. So if we listen to all these and bring them in gradually, here we achieved that really full, massive sound for this synth. It's going through a group bus, and there's loads of stuff going on in here. There's compressor to keep everything together, some EQ, a couple of EQs, and some delay and reverb. And I process them all together. It helps kind of glue them all together and make it sound like one coherent synth sound. So now we have the piano synth, which is kind of the main hook, the main motif for this track. And it's probably the part of the original track that kind of inspired me to remix, to interpolate this. It's just this really unique, dark, kind of hypnotic sounding melody, and it sounds like this with all the layers. So that's like three main layers once again. The first one, as you'd expect, is just a regular piano. I think it's, yeah, it's Ableton stock piano, grand piano. A lot of EQ, rolled off a lot of the bottom end, smashed up some of the highs and compressed it just to kind of keep everything kind of even. Pianos can be a nightmare in terms of dynamics, so this compressor just kind of keeps everything in the right place and just on its own. As you can hear, nothing too special about it, some reverb and delay on there. Next is this drift synth. This is a relatively new synth that's been added to Ableton, and it's kind of this analog emulation. And I've just, as you can see, I've just kind of made this kind of weird saw hybrid sound, rolled off nearly everything except the super highs, and that's really just to give it that buzz at the top end. And finally, there's another Ableton stock plugin here. This is one of their Clav. I think it's based off a synclavier or something similar to that, and it just gives it piano this kind of texture, this kind of almost distorted texture to it. So obviously, all together. Once again, going through loads of processing. It's going through a delay unit, some reverb, a lot of EQ. There was all sorts of frequencies coming through, harshness I had to kind of cut out, a compressor to keep everything together, an LFO tool, and that's about it. So to finish things off, we're going to look at like the effects section, and once again, just not a huge amount going on here. Just right at the bottom, we have this kind of tape hiss, which I'm using as a noise floor. So if we just solo that, and that just kind of fills in some of the blank space within the track. It's not something you would hear directly, but it just kind of gives that little bit of extra warmth, just subtle warmth at the bottom of the track. Um, Here we just have a number of different white noise sweeps. I think I made some of these in either Serum or Operator, and they're just like kind of basic. That type of thing, and I just bounced them to audio just so I didn't have more sort of synthesizers running. You have this kind of cool, this riser that I've made in Serum. Let's take a look. Yeah, it's serum patch to square waves. If you see, I put it into an instrument rack and link this macro to like the pitch, the filter cutoff, the LFO rate, the wavetable position, and it just, you watch as we play. Kind of creates this cool rising effect. And aside from that, we have a couple of impacts. Just kind of sort of like extra transitional percussion, and we have this sub drop, which is just as the beginning of the breakdown, which is kind of a nice little introduction to the kind of the melody. So if you listen to that in context of the track. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. I mean, as I say, it's not an overly complicated track, and it goes to show that, you don't, as I said earlier in the video, you don't need a billion and one plugins, you don't need a billion and one tracks to get a nice sounding tune out of it. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. If you're interested in me doing this type of thing again with more of my tracks, let me know in the comments. Get in touch, let me know what you think of the track. If you're a DJ and you've played it out, get in touch, let me know. Thanks for watching, and cheers to everyone of Pure Trance as well for releasing this track. Cheers to everyone who supports it. Cheers, good day.